Hello, everyone, and welcome to Reflect, Grow, and Thrive, a webinar series hosted by the YWCA in celebration of International Day of the Girl. I'd like to begin today's session with an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners of the various lands in which we meet around the country. I'm joining from Innisfail, Queensland, which is the Mamu people on whose land we gather on today. I welcome you to share the lens in which you are joining from in the Q&A chat function. We recognize that as immigrants to this country, we benefit from the colonization of the land now called Australia and have shared responsibility to acknowledge the harm done to its First Peoples and work towards respect and recognition. We recognize that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women are leaders in working to prevent the disproportionate levels of violence enacted against them, their children, and their families. We also acknowledge and celebrate that intersectional theory has largely emerged from Black, Indigenous, feminist activism and expertise in the United States and around the world, including Australia. We would like to acknowledge the continuing connection of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to land, sea, and community. To pay our respects to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander ancestors, elders, to those here today and the generations to come, as it always was and will be Aboriginal land. For any questions, please use the Q&A function, which will be moderated throughout the session. We will have 15 minutes dedicated to Q&A at the end of the session. We will be recording today's session, and the recording will be shared approximately 2 weeks after the webinar. We acknowledge that some of the topics discussed during the Reflect, Grow, Thrive series may be sensitive and resonate with you in different ways. If you need to take a break at any time, please do so. Grab a cup of tea or turn off your camera for a while. YWCA staff are also available, and you can message them directly via the Q&A function. Finally, we will be showing the survey on Friday afternoon, and we'd love your feedback on any sessions you attended this week. So to start off this webinar, we're just going to introduce the speakers. So firstly, if Mila, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Sure thing. Hello everyone, my name is Mila. I use she, her pronouns. I am coming at you from Wurundjeri land in Naarm or Melbourne, and I am a proud non-binary person, and I am the event coordinator for Minus 18, which is an LGBTQIA plus youth charity where I'll talk a bit more about it later, but it's all about creating safe and good spaces for young people to feel celebrated. And I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Tal, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name's Tal Fitzpatrick. I am also in Naarm on the land of the Wurundjeri and the Boon Wurrung people, and I'd like to pay my respect to them, to their elders, and to the community. I am an artist and an activist and a craftivist, and I finished my PhD into craftivism as a mode of DIY citizenship at the end of 2018. I also have a background working in the nonprofit sector with Volunteer in Queensland and in disaster affected communities across Queensland and New South Wales. So that's kind of where I'm coming at this from. It's nice to be here.
Thank you so much. An incredible resume there. Kat, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Kat. I'm also on Wurundjeri country here in Melbourne. So solidarity to all our friends making it through, hopefully, the end of lockdown. So I'm from the Tomorrow Movement, which is a youth organisation. We are building a movement of young people fighting for good jobs, great public services, and a safe climate for all. And yeah, I'll tell you more about it later.
Sweet, thank you so much. Neha, would you like to share about yourself?
Sure. My name is Neha Maddock. I work at an organisation called Democracy in Colour, which is an organisation fighting for racial and economic justice for people of colour across this continent, and we're doing that through community organising. I've worked on a bunch of other campaigns before, worked on the Yes campaign, done some stuff in the union movement, and I'm videoing in here from Ghana land.
Sweet, thank you all for sharing. I'm Melinda Kaur. I'm from Innisfail, Queensland, and I'm a university student on the YWCA Women's Council, and I'll be facilitating this webinar for today. So to start off this webinar, just a general question to the entire panel. Tell us about your advocacy and what social change you're working towards currently. So to start it off, Neha, would you like to start?
Yes, sorry, could you repeat that question?
Tell us about your advocacy and any social change you're working towards.
Yeah, for sure. So at Democracy in Colour, we are working towards something that we're calling the anti-racist rebuild. So this year, COVID-19 kind of set on fire all of these existing inequalities. And I'm sure that many people here either have already witnessed it or have experienced it themselves in some way, right? So like earlier this year, we did a whole bunch of strategic planning and we identified all of these issues. We identified all of these issues with migration and our visa system that exists here. We identified all of these issues to do with criminal justice and over-policing, especially of First Nations and Black and Muslim people. And we identified this real problem with hate speech in the media, where our media is, the way that the media companies are set up, the monopolies that are set up, especially News Corp and Channel 9 are actually profiting off of racism. And so we were like, well, how are we going to tackle this? And we came up with all these ideas. And then COVID-19 happened and everything had to change. But what we've then decided is that while we saw all of this stuff come to light, become mainstream issues during COVID-19. We suddenly had temporary visa workers on the front page of the newspaper. We had corona racism happening on the Today Show. We had we saw the over-policing, especially in places like Melbourne, of people living in public housing. So we know that all of these issues are super live right now and it doesn't make sense to address them on their own. So we are looking at what it means to have a rebuild in 2020 and 2021 and beyond. What is this world going to look like? Because we don't want to go back to normal, because normal was not okay for a lot of people, particularly people of colour and First Nations people. So we want to build back in a way that is anti-racist.
Yeah, that's such an important and such an important part of this pandemic that we're going through, is that the depth of the impact that it has had on communities. Obviously there is an important health aspect, but there are so many different aspects that aren't necessarily talked about. So incredible work that you and your team are doing. So thank you for your service. So Tal, moving on to you, how did your passion and your advocacy and your social change, how is that going on?
I guess I want to clarify that out of all the panelists here today, like I kind of operate as an independent artist as opposed to someone who's sitting within an amazing organization. So I'm a bit less like working on a specific campaign that's part of like a targeted thing and more kind of just floating around and using my skills and kind of leveraging my privilege in order to support and amplify the work being done by organizations like Democracy in Colour and -18 and the Pacific Climate Warriors. So the way that I kind of think about my art and particularly the kind of large scale participatory projects that I do is to help connect broader audiences and people who might not know about or be engaged with these kind of organizations and causes, and use my art practice as a way to kind of connect those and encourage people to both reflect on their values and also find ways that they can support organizations who are doing the grassroots work of doing things like the Pacific Climate Warriors. I'm doing a project with them at the moment, and they're also working on a project around a just recovery from COVID, but more spread out through the Pacific region. So yeah, I guess my stuff isn't targeted in that I do a lot of stuff around women's rights and a lot of stuff around climate change and a lot of like anti-racism stuff, but I get to kind of float around a bit more and pick and choose with different projects as they come up.
That's awesome. It's a nice broad net you have there. So yeah, incredible work. What about Miller? What does your advocacy involve, and how do you execute it?
Yeah. Firstly, can I just say I'm loving our passionate nodding of each other. So so cool to be in such a supportive nodding environment. Yeah, so Minus 18, we are Australia's largest LGBTQIA plus youth-driven organisation. Basically, our vision is to smash queerphobia. And we do that by creating spaces, as I said, for young people to feel safe and celebrated and kind of proud, like, proud of who they are, regardless of whether their family knows or not, or whether they're out or not, that kind of thing. But we've gone beyond events now as well, and we do education, very much like this panel stuff, but also workshops and training in terms of inclusive language, what the identities are and mean, and, kind of 101s and best practice for including and supporting LGBTQI plus people at work, at school, in the community, wherever. And I guess the vision for us is the more people who are educated and knowledgeable about these things, the more spaces we do create for young people to feel safe. So it's a really, really cool organisation to work for. And yeah, for me, as I said, I'm the events coordinator, so I get to host all the life-affirming, cute youth events. Mainly we mostly do 12 to 19, especially online for safety reasons. But yeah, that's kind of our focus audience. In non-COVID years, we've been lucky to do what's called the Queer Formal, which is basically like your high school formal, but it's for any young person 12 to 19 to dress how they want and bring who they want and have the night of their lives. And we've been delivering that in Adelaide, Sydney and Melbourne for the last few years. Obviously this year we're mixing it up a bit and doing it online, but yeah, it's fun work, and it's I want to say like subtle work in terms of when I think about activism and being on, front line and like fighting the good fight. For me, our activism and advocacy comes from a place of, safety and community. And that's kind of where I sit, and really stoked about that work too.
That's incredible. Loving the inclusivity and like the really warm and welcoming vibe is really infectious. So thank you for your service
Thank you,
and
Melinda.
the effort and your dedication towards your community. Kat, what does your advocacy and what social change are you advancing?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm also loving the vibe. I'm feeling very nourished by being in the space with you all. So Tomorrow Movement, we work on climate and economic justice, and the reason we put those two together is we found when we were forming Tomorrow Movement, just lots of the young people in our lives were feeling the crunch from so many different things, and just whether that's finding work or our mental health or just looking to the future and just being really bloody worried about climate change. It's just feeling as we rise up to these challenges, what are the common causes and how do we actually build enough power to address them? And so our theory of change basically is climate change and insecure work, and a lot of these challenges that we're facing are caused by similar things. And to put that a little bit too simply, perhaps, we think that big businesses in this country exert a lot of power over our politics, and that if we want a government to govern in a way that's actually fair for young people and for all Australians, and I mean that no matter where you were born or what your visa status is or whether you've been here for thousands of years, if we want to build a society for those people, we need to organize and build more power than the big businesses that are currently calling the shots have. So our advocacy is all about organizing and building deep, purposeful relationships with each other, both within our youth movement, but also as part of a movement of movements. So that's why I love coming to spaces like this and the chance to connect with other people who are bringing those worlds together.
That's incredible. I can definitely relate to that pressure, and I feel like it's a shared struggle with a lot of the youth of today, where there's a lot of aspects of our life, and now with this pandemic as well, it just feels like there's a crushing, overwhelming sense of just dread, essentially, about what the future holds. So it's incredible to have some sort of like semblance of faith and hope in the future. So thank you for your work. Much appreciated. So thank you for everyone for sharing a little bit about yourself. So now we're going to go into a little bit more specific targeted questions towards each panelist. So starting off, Tal, how did your passion for craftivism evolve, and how did you get into this area of work and like utilizing the arts in the way that you do?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question for us to have a chat about so far as like how we got into this, because I guess when I was young and I was thinking about all the issues that I cared about, I felt very disempowered and didn't really know how to like go about starting to do anything or making any change or having any kind of impact. So I guess coming out of high school, I did an arts degree on the Gold Coast where I grew up, and then decided to go into the not-for-profit sector because I wanted to be like more useful and not just do art. So I ran an arts and music program for young people with disabilities on the Gold Coast, and then got this job with Volunteer in Queensland, which involved going to disaster affected communities and doing capacity building workshops, and looking at community leaders' role in building disaster resilience. And like very unexpectedly, as part of that journey, I started to notice that everywhere I went, the arts were playing a really important role in helping communities recover from natural disasters. So I was working there just post the 2011 floods and the cyclones that happened in Queensland. And I also had the opportunity to do a series of UNESCO Youth Looking Beyond Disaster forums that happened in Christchurch after the earthquake, and in Sendai after the tsunami up there, and then with young people from the Pacific region in Auckland. And I just realized that art and storytelling was at the very heart of what it means to build resilience in community and within individuals as well. So it's something that we use to process our experiences and to express ourselves. And it's also something we use to bring communities together and to care for one another, and to raise our voice, which sounds super obvious and dumb when I like when it struck me, but I was like, no, maybe my art is important. So I went back to do a PhD because I wanted to find a way to kind of bring together my own arts practice, which to me at that point was a totally separate thing, and my community development work. And when I came across the word craftivism, which happened in my first year of research, I was like, this is what I wanted be when I grow up. It's like the perfect Venn diagram of like art and community development and activism as well, which again I thought was like a separate thing that I would have to do separately. So that was kind of like my little aha moment. And since then I've just been exploring through developing my own arts practice how I can better integrate all these things, and how I can speak, how I can find my own voice as an artist, and then how I can use the skills that I've learned to help other people find their voice, and how I can bring people together through creative projects to make a difference. And I guess mostly it's kind of in small ways, particularly in comparison to the kinds of work that you can do in the organizations that these wonderful people are a part of. But it is also something that you can do without having to be affiliated with anything. It's something that you can just start doing, and it's that process where you raise your voice, you find like-minded people, you can start doing things together, and you start to build your capacity to have influence and to make change.
Absolutely. I think one of the most incredible things that I have to agree with you 100% is the power of storytelling, and the idea that there's something very human and very tender almost about the connections that you can build by in-depth connections through storytelling. And the honesty and the emotion that comes through is something very precious. And you know, the art that you do and the way that you've connected to so many communities through your travel and through your work is very inspiring. And out of all of them, what would you say is probably one of like a couple of the highlights? Wait, you're mute. I think you're muted.
You're muted, Tal.
these are a few of the works that I do kind of for myself, and I often make like textile protest banners, and I physically take them out in protests. But I also just exhibit them in galleries because I think it's important to have these conversations in institutional spaces as well, and gallery spaces tend to be quite conservative. So I like to bring my like shouty craftivism into the gallery as well. But so far as the more collaborative projects I do, this is a project I'm working on right now with Kate Just, who's another Melbourne-based artist. It's called the COVID-19 Quilt Project. It's a totally participatory project where we've created a digital quilt on Instagram by inviting people from all over the world to share the craft-based pieces they're working on that reflect their experience of COVID-19. So since April, we've collected over 450 contributions from people from 26 different countries around the world. And alongside every image, people have been sharing a little bit about their experience. So it's becoming this amazing time capsule of what's happening and the kind of issues that people are concerned about, and how COVID-19 is actually impacting different people in different communities in different ways. And I think it's a really important document. So that's a really fun project that's still going. So if you want to contribute, you're welcome to. Find us on the grams. And this is, I guess I wanted to share this project because it's actually a collaboration I did this year, and it involved -18, Pacific Climate Warriors, Democracy in Colour, and YAKVIC as well. So I worked with each of those organisations, and as part of Next Wave Assemble, I created a banner for each of them, but they decided what the banner would say and what they wanted it to look like. And then I gifted the banner back to the organisation so that they could use it. So you can see there, -18 created this beautiful Stronger Together banner, and the centre bottom one, Dignity and Justice for All, was the banner I created with Tim for Democracy in Colour. So that's the kind of ways that I like to connect my own personal work with supporting organisations who are doing stuff as well. So this was also about raising money and bringing attention to the work that these organisations were doing as COVID was happening. But yeah, that's probably enough for now.
That's incredible work. They're really beautiful and they're so powerful. So continue taking pride in those pieces. They're incredible. So thank you for sharing about your experience, and you had so many experiences and so much knowledge. So keep thriving and keep growing. And we'll move on now to Kat. So if I am a young person passionate about a particular social change issue, for example, climate change, where do I start? It seems very overwhelming, and it can get really confusing about the right way to do it, how not to be hypocritical, or how to approach it in a friendly way.
Yeah, you're right. It can be really overwhelming, especially when you first learn about a problem or a number of problems. You're like, oh my God, where do I start? Really feel that. And I guess my answer is look around for some things that align with your values and make you feel powerful. And I say that because there are so many different ways to start. And for example, with climate change, I know often we we hear about climate change, or we live through the summer we all just lived through. And then, I don't know, you see something that's okay, well, we're all just going to recycle more, and we'll all just stop using disposable plastics, and that'll solve the problem. And you're oh, that actually, I did that. I do recycle. I got my mum to get a compost, and still climate change is not stopped. And so I guess my experience is I've definitely felt the most connected and powerful when I've had the opportunities to actually organize in a community that I'm part of. And I was really lucky when I started uni. There was this campaign that was just getting started to get the university to divest from fossil fuels, because they were actually investing the university's money in these oil and coal companies. And we were oh, you're selling our future down the river. And that seems really wrong. And we actually got the chance as students to like start organizing. We did a petition. We, at one point, just like kind of occupied the administration building. And we just did all these things, like gradually increasing our power and like trying new things and learning together. And eventually we did force the university to like open up to have like a public vote on like what we should invest. And they did end up investing away from coal. My mates at Monash University are still organizing for some more things. But it was really special to me because I got the chance to organize in my university community, and I got the chance to like learn and exercise my power there. And so something that we do at Tomorrow Movement is we always say like, you're most powerful, like speaking your truth and trying to like work on the issues where you are. So for example, if you're interested in getting involved in climate and economic justice at Tomorrow Movement, we have, we do like weekly welcome webinars where you can like join a call, find out a bit about what we do, and also find out how you can get the tools to start organizing in your community. And so my advice is to jump on the Instagrams or the TikToks or whatever it is that like is your space, and like look up the organizations that are speaking to you. So probably check out Democracy in Colour and Minus 18 and YWCA, and look out for opportunities where they are giving you a chance to build your power and get engaged. Yeah.
That sounds insane. Wasn't it like $450 million from that is a huge accomplishment, and it's really refreshing to actually see an impact that can be made, because I feel like often you're kind of reminded the fact that there's this pressure, whether it be through commercial companies or through the social media trends and whatnot, that you need to continue being more green, do these things, and these things. But then you realize that it's like a certain amount of companies, or it's like those who are most profiting of it, who have such a large impact, and we're sitting here with our metal straws. So it is an interesting dynamic, and it's so interesting to see the youth really pushing for it, and like the young generation really collectively fighting for that. So thank you for fighting for such a big fight. And I think one of the most, something that I struggle with as well is how do I get to a level, or how do the average person get to a level where they can create such change that you did, where you were able to get your university to divest $450 million from coal? How do you initiate that in a way that can actually be as effective?
I think the secret is that like I didn't do that. Like I did that with a big group of like other young people, other students, but also we got like the academics and the university staff like who involved to like sign open letters. One point we even got some of the university donors to like say some stuff. Like, so the point is that like on our own, we can feel like not very powerful, especially like up against really big challenges. So I think the trick is to just find some people who you can work together with, and like that could just be like your one friend who you're having this chat with and you're like really annoyed about something and you're like, oh, maybe there is something we can do. Or it could be that you're like on Instagram looking at these different organizations and you see like doing something amazing, and you DM them and find out like, how can I join my power with your power, and how can we achieve something together?
That's incredible. And obviously, when it comes to creating such a large change, you obviously need to coordinate a lot of things. And so, Miller, I've heard that you've had quite a lot of experience in coordinating events in Minus 18. So how important were those events in introducing young people to the community? Like that transition, how has that impacted the youth?
Yeah, great question. I think what a lot of people get wrong is they think, well, young people come out earlier these days, so everything's great and fine and they're just having a gay old time, and that there's no discrimination and bullying and mental health and anxiety and all the things that can come for a lot of young people in our community. But a lot of the young people that engage with our events, a lot of them are walking into a Pride event for the first time ever, which is like very anxiety inducing and stressful, but also exciting. But that's why we always have youth workers just everywhere at our events, because it is really overwhelming for a lot of young people. but you know, it's also very fun, and we make sure that they feel settled. But yeah, so a lot of those young people attending an event for the first time, they might have 1 or 2 friends at school, they might have no friends at school, but when they come to Minus, our events have 200, 300, 400 sometimes people, and they always leave feeling they've made friends. And when I think about that, I think about community. Like, you know, to young people, your friends are everything to you. I don't know about you, but when I was a young person, that was like, you know, the biggest deal. And to give them a space to connect with other people who are like them, and going through similar things to them, and that they might not have in their everyday life, is just, it's just very magic. And a lot of these young people, they come to these events, they get inspired, just like Kat's talking about, and like Tal as well. They get inspired by it, and they go away and they, like, you know, start a little group at their school where they do Pride March banners and, you know, watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine at lunchtime in a classroom as their queer group. But these little things, you know, have such an effect when it comes to self-acceptance. I was thinking about, for me, like, I didn't come out until I went to uni, and it took me a long time to sort of like feel comfortable in that. And what I see with the events that we do, we give a space for young people to sort of start to find that comfort a little earlier and express themselves in a way that they might not be able to otherwise. You know, we have a lot of young people bring their outfits in their bags and change when they get to the event. And it's just this beautiful time for them to have that space to explore that and not feel like they're being laughed at or judged or anything like that. So yeah, a big step in community building and friendship. And it's been really interesting as well to see it happen online too this year. We've been delivering lots of online events and seeing, again, more friendships and more connection to community when they might not normally have that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because obviously a lot of that community and that connectedness would be probably, I feel like, most effective when it's face to face and you're able to actually engage physically with your community. How has COVID impacted that?
Yeah, so like for me, when COVID hit in Naarm in March, like when it was really lockdown was happening, we were all at Minus 18 extremely worried, because, you know, for a lot of young people, they might not be out at home, or they might be out and not accepted. And that need for friendships and your peers was pretty much just cut off. So we really put our heads together and brainstormed how we're going to do this. And for me, like you said, Meninda, I was thinking this is going to have a huge impact, like negative impact on our events and our ability to make people feel connected. But I am continuing to be so pleasantly surprised by the results and the impact that we're getting through from our digital events, because it's virtually paralleled to our physical ones when we do our youth feedback. Like a lot of them, you know, again, it's their first time attending a Pride event. And interestingly, at our digital events, like 50 to 55% of each one, they're attending a Minus event for the first time. So like, that's huge numbers of our ability to reach more young people. We've found that digital events, to be honest, I've wondered why we haven't done it before now that we do it, because we're able to give that celebration, that fun, that sense of community to more young people in lockdown or regional areas or wherever they might be, and whatever reason they might not be able to access our events, they can now. But it's very cute. All our digital events are set up very much like this. Like, we all see each other. We get queer performers and, you know, competitions, and they all just dance and have a good time. And obviously we always keep it alcohol, drug and smoke free, and we always have youth workers supervising, and we sort of put these parameters around, but we are still able to make those spaces where they connect, and that's something I'm very proud of. And yeah, we'll definitely continue to do beyond lockdown.
To hear about a community like that is that's so wholesome, is really gratifying to hear. So thank you for the work that you guys are doing. And ultimately, obviously, community plays a huge role in advocacy and activism. And so Neha, can you tell us a little bit about what's it like working with Democracy in Colour and how the work there is impacting communities?
Sure. So we take a community organising approach to everything that we do, and that means really basically that the people who are most impacted by an issue, where they are, when they are, what they are, they're the ones who lead the outcomes and lead on the impacts. Kind of like what the example that Kat was talking about before, like that is a community organising example of students in their area, in their community, organising for change. And so organising is about building power. Like we as people, we don't always have the money or the institutional power. Like we're not always the CEOs, we're not the VC at university, we're not running Westpac, but we are people. And there are so many of us. There's only one CEO of Westpac, but there's a lot of staff there, right? Or there's only one VC at your university, but there's thousands and thousands of students. So when it comes down to it, they might have the money and the ability to make decisions, but we as people have the power to, sometimes it's withhold our labor. So the staff at Westpac might choose to not all turn up one day. And by going on strike, they're taking action in a way that would really impact the profits that that CEO would expect that day, right? So that's basically organising. It's building that people power, coming together, figuring out what your shared values are, what your shared interests are, what is it that we all need from each other, what is the change that we want to achieve, and then going out there and making it happen and building that power together. And once you have that power, it never goes away. Like you just maintain it. So what we're doing is we're looking to build the power of people of colour across the continent. And some of the key areas that we really want to focus on with our anti-racist rebuild include areas of Western Sydney, so Southwest Sydney, where I grew up, really migrant, an area where there are a lot of new migrants coming through. Areas of Melbourne, like North Melbourne and the Dandenong region, parts of Brisbane, also parts of Adelaide, where there's so many new migrants coming in and so many people seeking asylum as well, making the area their new home. So there are so many parts of the country where people of colour are not empowered in the way that we can be and we should be. And part of it is the systems that exist to hold us back. Like the temporary visa system means that you don't step up, you don't speak out because you want permanent residency or you want citizenship. The way that we treat people seeking asylum and refugees clearly is meant to not just disempower people, but break people. And the fact that they're kept out of sight and out of mind is not, is intentional. Keeping them on islands offshore means that people here on the land don't organise. And where they are on the land, people are organising. So for example, the way that we operate is we have state teams. So we have like state coordinators in kind of each area. And off that example, our state team in Queensland have been organising in their local area for issues affecting them. And one key racial justice issue they've identified they wanted to work on was as a result of COVID-19, people who were medically evacuated from different islands were brought into Brisbane, Kangaroo Point, and were being kept in hotels with no one knows what's going to happen to them, basically. And so the Queensland team organised with a whole bunch of other community groups. So they used their power. They found all these other groups, the African Council, the Islamic Council, the Electrical Trades Union, the Warriors for Aboriginal Resistance, all sorts of groups. They got together, they already had these great relationships, and they organised a blockade, and they made this a mainstream issue. And that blockade is still ongoing. So that is one, and like people across Brisbane are engaged. Like school kids come and they do cupcake drop-offs on the way in and out. The Electrical Trades Union comes and gives them pizza every day. Like people are holding that line and they're keeping it going. And that's a part of community organising that gives me a lot of strength. Another example during COVID as well is the lockdown of Melbourne public housing in North Melbourne. So obviously lots and lots of groups are really engaged in that. Our Victorian team, we're just like one of many groups. But what we really did was we looked at what are the people in the community saying, what are they asking for, what are they calling for, and how can our Victorian team help in delivering that. And so our state teams have a lot of power in that way, where they can kind of be like, well, we work on racial justice, we work on economic justice, and we're working on, at that time, specifically like rapid response work to COVID-19 related issues. And so then nationally, we were doing a lot of work around wage subsidies and making sure that every single person, there's 2 million people who've been left out of JobKeeper and JobSeeker, that every single person was able to get that access. We were able to do that in different ways. But where there was a local issue that was really popping up, so the public housing or the refugees, those teams pivoted to that because that was the thing that meant the most to them in that community. So that's kind of how we operate, where we've got like a national campaign going and people, you know, people in WA, people in Sydney were really working on that. But when those moments happened, Queensland and Victoria pivoted to work on something else.
That sounds incredible. That structure really allows for a broader influence across the nation. And moving on to Q&A from the audience members, this actually really well links in because if someone wants to actually approach an organization, so any of the panelists can answer this, if someone wants to approach an organization that you're really keen to work for, and obviously they aren't necessarily always hiring, but how would you put yourself out there and approach those organizations if you are passionate for them? How do you utilize your activism in that way? Tal, do you want to answer that?
I feel like I may be like the least insightful into this because I'm not with an organisation, but having worked for Volunteer in Queensland and having got most of my opportunities through volunteering, I cannot say enough about the fact that volunteering is an amazing way to make connections, to kind of get an in with organisations that you love, and that might not even be like formal volunteering, because even volunteering within organizations in an official ongoing way can be really competitive as well, and they can have limited places because volunteer management is hard. But stuff like specific campaigns, supporting by amplifying campaigns that are happening online, signing petitions, like all that kind of stuff, showing that you have been involved with that organization over time is really important. And the other thing I would add is use your skills to support their work. So I often do kind of fundraising for organisations that I love, like Children's Ground is an organisation that I've raised a bit of money for through selling work and using the profits from my artwork to donate, like doing online charity auctions or so whatever it is, it doesn't have to be art, whatever you're good at, get some friends together, raise some money, donate it. That makes a big difference to their work because that's a good way to support.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your answer. I think another really interesting aspect of the work that you all do, and I think Miller, you might be the one to answer this, is obviously you guys are tackling issues like racism, homophobia, all these type of negative attributes of society, unfortunately. How do you overcome those who try to oppose you or that try to interfere with your work? Do you try to get them to understand through education, a conversion of some sort, or do you just move on?
Yeah, I can definitely speak to this. We've had run-ins in the past with different community members, religious groups, all kinds of people who think that our work is inappropriate, that we're sexualizing children, that we're forcing everyone to be transgender. The list goes on. It's kind of revolting when you sort of sit and reflect on it. For me, with our education and training, there is often people who push back and in workshops and ask, antagonizing questions and, you know, maybe not directly shouting homophobic things in your face, but like really pushing you.
Subtle?
Yeah, like really subtly antagonizing you. In those spaces, we are there to educate. And so we unpack the questions and we get people to think about, well, why are you asking it in that way? And what's the context of your question? And like really, you know, it takes a lot of patience. I got to be honest. I did workshops for a long time at Minus 18, and it took a lot of patience for me to do that. In those spaces, absolutely. But in the other spaces where people are just bigoted for no reason, we just kind of pay them no mind, as Marsha P. Johnson would say. We just, you know, keep doing our work and we're fueled by it. If I can just share a quick story, the first year we hosted the Queer Formal, much, you know, way before my time at Minus. It was a paid event back then. Now all our events are free. But back then it was paid, and a religious group bought all the tickets to stop anyone from coming, which was really awful. But that actually inspired us to then refund it all and have this free event, because we realize it's an accessibility thing. It makes more people access it, but also it reduces this issue. But on the day, they were so worried about the backlash from groups, and a bit of media attention came to this as well. And I actually well with tears every time I think about this. But what happened was a whole bunch of adults and volunteers turned up on the day and like linked arms and created a human chain for like young people to like be able to walk inside safely. I know, it actually makes me so emotional. And, you know, like give them that freedom to just walk in and don't worry about the others. We've got you. And for every hater, we get many more supporters. So that's sort of how we tackle it at our org.
That's actually so incredible. An audience member said, Mila, that story gave me goosies. So it's very wholesome, and wow, absolutely. Yeah, to the audience members, feel free to continue sending in messages and questions. These are great. So one person, touching on back to what we were talking, Kat, in regards to, you know, if I'm just one person, can I really make a difference? You know, I've had multiple people tell me that I'm alone and that I can't make an impact. However, you know, the area that I'm fighting for, and that is my passion, is underrepresented and needs support. How do you go about facing that?
Yeah, this is such a good question. And yeah, again, I really resonate with that feeling of like, sometimes you can feel like it's you against the world. And I'm sorry, I don't know what specific issue you're talking to. Feel free to chuck it again in the Q&A if you want to. But I would say like what I do when I like am facing any kind of like, I guess, challenge like that is I think about like, what tools do I actually have? And like sometimes that can be really hard because you can feel like, especially as a young person, like you don't have a lot of access to a lot of things, but you might be like, look, actually I have like, I don't know, I have my phone, I have my social media, I have like X many people follow me, even if it's not that many, but like I could raise awareness at least to my friendship group, or like I could find, kind of like Tal was saying, like her skill is art, so she can sell some art and raise money. And that's really cool. Like, so it's just, I think, thinking about like, what do I actually have and what can I use? And if you're sitting there thinking like, oh, I don't have that much, maybe there are people you can ask who do have and can help you. Like maybe you can reach out to the folks on this panel and ask them for advice of like, how can you get started and what can you do? Yeah, that's where I would start.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, and as you were saying, if anyone in the audience wants to reach out, feel free to get in contact with the YWCA or hit these organizations up on the socials and search them up. But absolutely, I think another thing is that, you know, while you're tackling such incredibly like heavy and sometimes, you know, confronting topics, how do you manage mental and physical health while you're doing advocacy, activism, volunteering? Neha, in your situation, you know, you're dealing with people who, you know, who have gone through some really tough circumstances. And, you know, I once did a presentation on refugees, and it can be really distressing and confronting when you're faced with the true struggles and the true, you know, the circumstances that these people are faced with. How do you deal and cope with that responsibility?
Yeah, I think there's a few different ways that you deal with it, right? And it can be like in any issue and in any way. There's the individual way and then there's the collective way. So from an individual way, the government's just announced that everyone's getting 20 psychology sessions. Get on that. Go to your GP, even if you're like, I don't have any issues, I don't have any trauma. Just go talk to someone. Everyone needs it. Like, I've been in therapy for I don't know, like 8 years, and I talk about it all the time. Just go. So go get your mental health plan. That's the first thing to do, and go see a great therapist. Like, go find a queer friendly, racial justice friendly, like go find those therapists. They're out there. There's some great Instagram accounts that list the ones in your area. And then and also like have good networks. Like me and Kat, we are good buddies. We talk all the time. I think we've only met face to face like once, but like find those people who care about the things that you care about, connect with them, be vulnerable with them, share how you're feeling, because that's the only way that I find that I stay sane, honestly. And then from the collective way, right? Like, so the way that we believe in racial justice in a really holistic way. And that means as well that we don't do what I like to call trauma porn. Like we don't do like white savior stuff, because that's not what we're about. We're about empowering people of color to share their stories, to take back their power. So we don't need to go into great detail as to like what happened to someone when they were in a refugee camp, or what happened to their parents, or what happened, like to some of those really deep, dark places. Like people can share that stuff, and we create space for people to talk about that. But we always flag in our like groups and stuff that we're here for a purpose, and that purpose is to work towards changing the systems that mean that that stuff happens to us. So that's what we're doing here together, and that's what we're working on. We can talk to each other as friends about some of this stuff, but we also need to recognize that sometimes it can be really tough content, and that's what our psychologists are for. Hence back to the make sure you always have a mental health plan on the go, because there is stuff that like can just re-traumatize people, and there's no power there. There's no power in sharing like a really tragic story and then being like, well, now we all feel hopeless. Our power comes from feeling hopeful and from feeling powerful together. So what we want to do is share those stories where, yes, we may have had a tough time, but this is how we came through it together. This is where the hope lies. This is where the action and the outcome lies. Yeah.
Wow, that was really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. That was 10 out of 10. Holy smokes. That was incredible. Absolutely. I think there's definitely a romanticization or like a glorification of tragedy in that sense. And often, whether it be through media or, it's happened multiple times, and it's really important to highlight that. And a question from the audience is, for example, are there any pointers to put a case to an employer that advocacy is important when it isn't seen as a priority area, for example, in a youth homelessness organization? Who wants to answer this one? Kat?
I never go. Yeah, man, internal change is really hard. Like you always have to fight your hardest battles, like where you are. And I would suggest to like, for me, what's helpful is like asking the question, like, why is this still this way? Like, we only have limited resources to like do the like direct help that we can, but like, is this problem going to keep happening if we never address the root causes? And so have like starting those conversations at your workplace, and I guess trying to like maybe access any training for yourself or your managers or whoever like needs to have those kinds of conversations about systems change.
And the only thing that I would add to that, is join your union and work collectively with your workmates to make that change happen. If you don't know what your union is, go to australianunions.com and you can find out there.
100%. And do your research, because often there is a model of something that's already working somewhere else that you can point to. You don't have to reinvent the wheel often. You just have to demonstrate that there is another better way to do things that is less damaging. And that goes a long way towards winning your argument.
Absolutely. Mila, any words?
what they said.
Sounds good. Awesome.
Yeah.
No, that's incredible. Yeah, such important, powerful words. One last question before we finish up. Can meaningful, widespread change occur on a national level within the current political systems? In a capitalist conservative government run by old white men, it sometimes feels impossible, and I can't help but agree. How do we overcome this this almost like the glass ceiling, if you will, that's been put on us all? Nia?
Sure. It's happened before and it's happening right now. We these are all made up concepts. The economy is not a real thing. Like all of this stuff, we just make it up and we just create it so we can change it. Like we had amazing constitutional reform in 1967, where we got rid of the very outrageous fact that Aboriginal people were not considered people. But we changed that. Like people got together collectively and we changed that. Women won the right to vote. We changed that. Just this year, Democracy in Colour got Pauline Hanson kicked off the Today Show. We changed that. Like that is stuff that we can do together, and it's happening all the time. And all I do, like every day, I just remind myself, like, this is an amazing change that's happened this week or last week or whatever, because otherwise you do feel like that.
Absolutely. I think it's in the current like political environment, it is despite all the traumatizing events that we're going through, finding the hope in even the smallest of things is one of the most gratifying things, and actually finding empowerment by through the organizations that you guys are all a part of, being connected, empowering yourself with advocacy, and actually being active in those communities and reaching out is really important. Tal, did you want to add anything?
I do. I always want to like remind us that it's not national, it's global. Like this is happening at a global scale, and what we need to focus on is like think global, act local, do what you can where you have power, focus on the thing that you care most about. We can't all be the ones to fix everything, but you can do something about something, and you can start small and you don't know where it's going to grow to. But yeah, practice gratitude and pay attention to the things that are changing, not just the shouty trolls on Twitter. and yeah,
Absolutely.
connect with like-minded people.
Did Mila and Kat, did you guys want to add some last positive, encouraging words for our audience members before we leave?
Yeah, I
No.
just want to say, you know, like don't underestimate your power and your impact. And I think we can take that from what everybody said today. The little things can do such a big difference. And I think engaging in the conversation is something I've really been working on as an ally this year. Like my family are very conservative, and I've just pushed through and like tried to meet them somewhere and create the change in my own world.
You, that's awesome.
But like, you know, politicians are meant to represent us. The more we all speak up, the more they have to listen. So yeah, back yourself and take steps as you can and take care of yourself and fight the good fight. That's what I'll end on.
Awesome. Kat?
I'm happy to leave it there. I'm feeling so charged up by everything everyone's already said.
Awesome. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us for today's webinar. Kat, Mila, Neha, and Tal, thank you for sharing your insights and expertise with us today. And you've given our audience today a lot to consider. If you guys have any other further concluding words, no? Sweet.
No, just thank you, Meninda. You rocked it. It was great to be part of it.
Thank you. If you have any additional questions to the audience, for the audience members, you can reach out to the YWCA team at giving@ywca.org.au. That is giving@ywca.org.au. Feel free to hit up our panelists on social media, follow the organizations, reach out, stay connected. And thank you for your time, and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thanks.
Thank you.